Ancient Troy. Before I dive too far into this, I do want to talk about the fact that today we're going to be presenting ideas and a little bit of back history of the Iliad that you may not have ever heard about. We've heard, actually I should put it this way, there are a few ways of taking a look at the evidence concerning the Iliad. The Iliad that's ascribed to Homer. Mm-hmm. There's different ways of looking at it. We have, of course, the perspective of the Iliad about those events, right? And we think that, well, maybe that's it. But there is another source about what happened at Troy. Another source is the Mycenaeans. Who are the Mycenaeans? Those are the Greeks. And what had happened is way back before, during the time of the Trojan Wars, you have the Mycenaeans, and they kept records about who they are and their culture and so forth. But we have another source, and that's the archaeological evidence at Troy itself. But there's a fourth bit of evidence concerning Troy and the Trojan Wars, and that's the Hittite evidence. That's what we're going to be talking about today. But before I do that, let's talk about the Iliad. Yeah. Now, not to get ahead of myself, but it's going to be very difficult to summarize the entire Iliad in a short amount of time. I don't think I'm up for that. No. But what I want to do is talk about the fact that the Iliad is a war poem. Mm-hmm. This epic recounts an expedition of the Mycenaeans when they went to besiege the city of Troy, and it was believed to occur around 1190 BCE. And what happened, according to the Iliad, this war lasted for 10 years. Excuse me. It lasted for 10 years. But the action of the Iliad itself, this great epic poem, as opposed to taking up the entire 10 years, it only focuses on toward the very last year and a couple of weeks of action. And yet, it's an amazing piece of work. But there is a backstory. But before I go there, I want to talk about Homer. Now, it is said that Homer is the one that composed or created the Iliad. There's a lot of controversies concerning this. In fact, I talk to my students quite often about this. And I ask a trick question sometimes. I say, who is the person who wrote the Iliad? And then, of course, somebody goes, Homer! And I go, Homer didn't write anything. Because the Iliad wasn't written by Homer. They believed that he was the one who composed it through oral tradition. There was no writing down anything. Homer was a bard. What had happened after the great Mycenaean age of the Greeks? Unfortunately, there were the sea people. The sea people came about and other disruptions, and the Greeks went into this great dark age. This dark age lasted for 400 years. During this period of time, people became illiterate. There was no writing. The last writing system, of course, was Linear B of the Mycenaeans. No writing. So how do you carry on the stories? Through oral tradition. And who tells those stories? They're called bards. They're these traveling storytellers, went from place to place, town to town. Sometimes they accompanied various troops in battle. Other times they just sat around and spread their yarns. They became very popular. We have television today. We have movies today. We have the internet today. You know what they had? They had bards for entertainment. That's what they had. And people haven't changed too much. They love stories of great monsters and amazing gods and bravery and so forth. And entertained by the same kinds of things that we are. And accordingly, Homer was one of these bards. Now, bards put together something that is called rhapsodies. Rhapsody. Sounds kind of familiar. Bards, rhapsodies. Anybody ever heard the song Bohemian Rhapsody? Mm-hmm. Right? And when you hear Bohemian Rhapsody, do you notice how the song suddenly changes quickly? It's calm, and then suddenly abrupt and loud, and then quiet again. It's a rhapsody. Well, what happens in a rhapsody? You see, the word rhapsody means stitching of songs. Stitching, sewing of songs, putting it together. That's what Homer is. Homer, whoever he was, if he existed at all, he is a stitcher of songs. He's the one who heard this great song, and he thought to himself, I like that song. And he heard another great song, I like that song too. And these songs told of a heroic age, the Mycenaean age, where gods and humans interacted together. And he sewed these songs together, piece by piece, bit by bit, and of course created a great meter to fit it all together. I'll tell you a little something though. Some of that meter comes from before Homer, before this time. There's earlier trends and tendencies that tell you the fact that even though the writing style has certain consistencies, that seems to have, for the Iliad, have some kind of author in mind. There's still inconsistencies here and there that seems like somebody else is writing. Or sorry, somebody else is composing, not writing at all. Bad. Somebody else is composing this material. Somebody else put this together. But wouldn't you expect that? If you're sitting there, you heard all these different songs being memorized and said to you, wouldn't you do the same thing? Oh, cut and paste, cut and paste, cut and paste. And you got it. And so that's why the Iliad, you have periods of time where the action's going forward and then it cuts back. There's another story. And so forth. Stitcher of songs. So it's very possible that maybe a Homer did write this, or could it be a group of different bards? No matter what, you still have the Iliad as the result. But what about the backstory of the Iliad? What about the backstory of the Trojan War? I want to talk about this story. It all has to do with a golden apple.
Yeah.
Now, the story, the story of this, actually, the funny thing is there's a whole body of oral tradition coming back down from the Mycenaean period of time, from earlier on. And what had happened is that the Iliad and the Odyssey, attributed to Homer, was put together. But there were also stories floating around about what happened before the Iliad. And of course, this is known as the Trojan cycle. One of these works was known as the Cypria. It is the epic work that is the prequel of the Iliad. You know, just like Star Wars received prequels, well, the Iliad received a prequel. The Cypria was written after the time of the Iliad and the Odyssey. But the materials in the Cypria date from a time contemporaneous to the materials earlier on. So it's still the same oral tradition stories from the Mycenaeans. And the Cypria is the one that contains the story of the beauty contest. We do not have the Cypria extent. What we have instead are summaries of it and a few surviving lines here and there. And here is the beauty contest. It goes like this. In a short way, there is a great wedding. There is a great wedding between the goddess Thetis and the mortal Peleus. By the way, Thetis, and the goddess, and Peleus are the parents of Achilles. And there's a great ceremony, a great celebration, and everybody's invited. Isn't that great? Everybody's invited except for one goddess. One goddess, her name is Eris. She's the goddess of this court. And she was not invited. And she was not very happy about this. So as they're having the great celebrations, she approaches. And she throws a golden apple in their midst. On this golden apple was inscribed, "For the fairest one." Okay, the fairest one. Who could that be? Yes, who could that be? Because immediately the goddesses start going, well, Hera's all, that's for me. Aphrodite says, no, the fairest one, that golden apple's for me. Athena says, guys, it's for me. And they start arguing amongst themselves. It's my golden apple, it's my golden apple, it's my golden apple. Then, of course, they ask Zeus. Zeus, you decide who this apple is for. Zeus did a very intelligent move. He decided that because his wife was amongst the contestants, he opted himself out. No, I can't possibly do this. I know a fair judge. His name is Paris. He's one of the 50 princes of Troy. His father is King Priam. And he judged the match a long time ago. And he did a really good job. He was a good judge. It was actually a contest between two bulls. His bull and another bull. And they're fighting each other. And of course you think that Paris would be biased about which one is better. But he chose the other bull, which is smart because that bull was a representation of Ares, the god of war. And because he was so fair-minded, he's perfect for this contest. So, it goes, so of course the three goddesses approach Paris. This is called the Judgment of Paris.
Poor guy.
Oh, I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. But what they do is, of course, they try to fix the game. What do you mean by fixing the game? Well, what they're going to do is they're each going to give their little special inducements. Hera says, oh, Paris, if you choose me, I'm going to make you a great king. Right? I'm going to make you king over Europe and Asia. Well, this is pretty good. You know. Then Athena approaches him and she says, you know what, I'll make you a great warrior. And then Aphrodite comes up and says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give you the most beautiful woman in the entire world. And you know what he does? He gives that golden apple to Aphrodite. Of course, she also put a special glamour upon herself to make herself even more beautiful, and flowers popped up all around her, according to the story. Flora and others had a little extra credit that day. So he picked her, and I go, oh, that's great. Paris gets the most beautiful woman in the entire world. There's just one problem. The most beautiful woman in the entire world is married to King Menelaus of the Mycenaeans, of the Greeks, of the Achaean Greeks. Oh, so what happens? Long story really short. He arrives with a special embassy. He somehow convinces Helen to go with him. And they go off. And they go back to Troy. Steals her away. Menelaus is extremely angry. He wants to get her back. He's not a real good husband. But anyway, he wants to get her back. Calls on his brother Agamemnon. They get together and yes, we're off to Troy. Simple, right? And the fleet of ships go across and they arrive at Troy. Well, that doesn't end there. That's, of course, you have various episodes that occur. The war lasts for 10 years. The Iliad, as I mentioned, takes place at the very end of that war. The story opens with Chryses, the Trojan priest of Apollo, begging for the return of his daughter, who has a name that's Chryses. Why do people name their kids in such a similar way? You see, Chryses, the daughter of this priest of Apollo, was taken as a slave by a king Agamemnon. And dad wants daughter back. So he begs Agamemnon, hey, please, please, bring my daughter back. You don't want her. Don't sleep with her. Don't be with her. Don't do this. Agamemnon says, no. No matter what kind of treasures you give me, I'm not giving her up. So what happens is that, of course, he's a priest of Apollo. So he prays to Apollo and sends a great plague. And people are starting to be knocked off in droves. Finally, what happens is Achilles goes, come on, Agamemnon. It's obviously paraphrasing here. And with all the others, you really need to give up the slave girl. Is it worth the plague? Getting us all sick to do this? And Agamemnon's angry. He says, all right, give her up so the plague stops. Good, Achilles says, and the others do. Good. So, yes, he gives her back, but what he takes in compensation for his loss is the slave girl of Achilles. Mm-hmm. Now, Achilles, what? Wait, what? You took my slave girl away? You can't do that. And her name is Briseis. And so he takes her away, and now he's really mad. And so Achilles decides, well, if you take her away, I refuse to fight with you. I refuse to fight for the Greeks. And he goes and he sulks in his tent. And he sulks and he sulks and he sulks. Very upset. But Achilles does one thing worse. He then goes to his mama. He goes to goddess Thetis and says, Thetis, can you teach Agamemnon a lesson? Talk to Zeus and make the Greeks really suffer so they miss me. And so I get my slave girl back. Because, Achilles has his priorities. Oh, and that's kind of what happens. So Zeus goes along with the plan, sending Agamemnon a dream indicating the opportunity had arrived to fight. While the king decides to do so, he was also uncertain if the men were really into it and gave him a choice. Would you like to go home? It doesn't go too well because everybody wants to go home. So, whoops, and then Odysseus takes care of it. No, you guys, he's just joking. We're going back, okay? All right. And so they go ahead and they start to fight. And of course, the sides are all lined up. Now, Paris, it is Paris' fault. He did steal Helen. It is his fault. So his older brother, Hector, convinces Paris to have a one-on-one engagement with Menelaus, the husband whom he wronged. So the battle goes not too well. It looks like Paris is going to die. Just at the moment of the death strike, Aphrodite takes him away. Snatched away, and he is brought into his own bed with his lovely Helen by his side. Aphrodite's like, oh no. So there we go. Okay, well that's not good. Now remember, the two sides had a truce during this period of time. There's a truce going on during this duel. But what happens is that a certain Pandorus by name, the Trojan side, was influenced to shoot an arrow at Menelaus by Zeus, by the way, because Hera, saying, come on, you got to hold your end of the deal. And so the war commences. There's a great war that goes on. Diomedes is a great warrior for the Trojans, and he is so strong in many cases, he's beaten up gods. Seriously, he's beaten up Athena, he's beaten up Ares. He's a strong one. Kind of skipping through the whole time they're doing this. Then what happens is that Zeus decides, okay, it's time for all the gods and goddesses not to take sides. We're out of this. And let them fight on their own. So the fighting goes on without the gods helping out. But at one point, it looked like that the Trojans are going to win. And you know, it looks like the not the Trojans, but the Greeks are going to win. And it was like, oh no. And Hera, the wife of Zeus, goes, well, I gotta take care of this one. So Hera, because remember, Zeus is on the side of the Trojans. Hera's on the side, of the Greeks. And what happens is that Hera seduces Zeus and gets him nice and tired. And during that time, what happens is that Hera appoints Poseidon to change the tip of the battle, and the battle's going the other way. When Zeus comes to, he realizes, oh no, what's going on here? And once again, the battle commences, but this time all the gods and the goddesses are involved in the story. Now, I'm going to be summarizing more in a quicker way here. It's going really bad. Patroclus is the best friend of Achilles. And Patroclus just can't stand not to fight and help the Greeks. They're losing. What are we going to do? And Achilles just could care less at this point. He is so far in hubris, it's ridiculous. He says, okay, well, I suppose I can give you my armor. You wear my armor, and they'll probably think it's you. You go out there. You don't stay out there too long. Just, show yourself. It'll marshal the troops, and maybe they'll win that way. I'm not going to be a part of that, but, they may think that it's you. It's you as me. And so that's exactly what happens. But the problem is that Patroclus gets a little bit too zealous, and he starts fighting, and everybody thinks he's really Achilles. And he chases the Trojans all the way to the wall of Troy, where Hector picks him off, kills Paris. Now, Achilles is extremely angry. Huh?
Not Paris.
I'm sorry. Hector kills, kills Patroclus. Patroclus, now what happens is that, sorry about that, is that Achilles is so angry with the death of his beloved Patroclus, he mourns him, and so he swears revenge, and so he attacks. Long and the short of it is that he defeats Hector, defiles his body, drags his body around Troy, and then in the end, Patroclus appears to Achilles as a ghost, says, please bury me. They have funeral games for a day, and at which point King Priam arrives in a wagon, undercover, and he shows up, and then he appears before Achilles and grabs his legs and begs for pity and mercy. I want the body of my dear son Hector back. And he gives it, and that's the end of the story. Whew. All right, there it is. That's the Iliad. What? I always get this. No Trojan horse? No. No Troy being destroyed? No. Oh, I feel ripped off. Well, that's what happens. The story of the Trojan horse is another story. And unfortunately, it goes between the Iliad and the Odyssey. And we won't have to tell that story. The long and the short of it is that Troy falls. Now that we have the story in mind, and we remember, those who are the Greeks are the Mycenaeans. Those who are the Greeks in the story, the Achaean Greeks, are the Mycenaeans. Well, we're able to read Linear B. We're able to read the story, well, actually read the writings of the Mycenaeans. And as a result of that, we know a little bit about the Mycenaeans. Now, I talked about this before, but I'm going to give a quick summary. That has survived of the Mycenaeans. We have over 1,000 tablets that were discovered, dating from the ones that mention the various gods date from 13,000 to 1200 BCE. Obviously, there's earlier Linear B writings, but these are the ones that pertain to it. And what we discover from the Mycenaean documents is rather interesting. It turns out that the majority of gods that are mentioned in the Iliad were actually worshipped at the time of the Mycenaeans, 400 years earlier. That's a big deal. We have confirmed information from various sites that the gods mentioned come from earlier on. For instance, we have references to Zeus. We have references to Hera. We have references to Artemis. We have references to Poseidon. We have references to Hermes. So we have references to Ares. So all the gods, or at least most of the gods, the male gods, that were worshipped and esteemed and mentioned in the Iliad 400 years earlier were already worshipped by the Mycenaeans. So this is a rather big deal. And I'll go into this, of course, more in detail right now. For instance, at a place known as Pylos, located in southwestern area of the Peloponnese Peninsula, the Linear B mentions that there are special gifts given to the gods. There's over 1,000 tablets that were found. Zeus appears. We even know that there is a priest of Zeus. We also know that there is a masculine and feminine form of Zeus. We also realize that Poseidon has a masculine and feminine side. Right? So it goes both ways. We have, in fact, this is a whole other talk, but we have mention of a great goddess as well, and Artemis. But there are a few gods that are not mentioned. Aphrodite is not mentioned, and Athena is not mentioned. But most of the others are. But where we want to go is actually, I want to say this too. The Mycenaeans, just like the Iliad, are great warriors. They are patriarchal, right? They don't treat women very well, sometimes almost like chattel. They're kind of like pirates in so many different ways too. Going about marauding various coastlines. And so much of the character that we see from the Linear B writings of the Mycenaeans does fit the personality of the Greeks as mentioned in the Iliad. But I don't want to spend my time talking about the Mycenaeans because we already had a lecture on that. I want to talk about today something that you're not going to hear anywhere else. This is the reason why you're here. I want to talk about the other story of the Trojans. I'm going to tell you right now the story of the Trojans from the perspective of the Hittites. Here we go. Now, according to Hittite records, the Trojans were first associated with what's called the Asua League. It's kind of exciting because what happened here is I'm putting together an entire narrative that I've never seen elsewhere, using primary sources and other materials, but also articles from 2011, 2012, 2013, you get the idea. This is the newest stuff out. Right? they're associated with the Asua League, A-S-S-U-W-A, which had 22 members amongst them. The word Asua, A-S-S-U-W-A, may not mean anything to you, but it will in a few seconds. According to, the Asua League is not only mentioned by the Hittites, it's mentioned by the Mycenaeans too. And instead of calling them the Asua, they call them the Asua. The Asua. Although there's variants of the word, they call it the Asiwa Jo, the Asiwa Ya, the Asiwa Tita. Different Mycenaeans use different words, but for the Hittites, they're the Asua. And the Asua, this region, this confederacy, is located in the western section of what is now Turkey. It's the western section of what is now Turkey. Asua, Asia, Asia. Yes. Now something, and what happens is that the Greeks will start calling that area, as opposed to Asiwa, they'll start calling it Isla and then Asia. And then they go, oh, we'll call it Asia. And then what happens is that they keep discovering more and more places further and further off. So they decide to distinguish. We'll call the area what is now Turkey, Anatolia, Asia Minor, and the other part is called Asia Major. Eventually, it becomes connected to the continent of Asia. I just told you where we got the name of an entire continent. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a big deal. All of a sudden, that word Asua is a big deal. Mm-hmm. So we find in Hittite records that there's this confederacy, the Asua. That, of course, will become known as Asia. And we look at the names of the confederacy, and there's a name on there. It says, and one of the names is Wilusa, W-I-L-U-S-A. Wilusa. It's Wilusa. That's Troy. No, it doesn't sound anything like Troy. Let's take this step by step. You see, this is the ancient name of Troy. You see, what had happened, and this is fascinating, is if you take off the W off of Wilusa, it becomes Ilusa. Ilusa, Elusium, Ilium. Ilium, the Iliad. That's the name for Troy. Yeah. But you're going, that W bothers me. Well, don't worry. Because what happened is this, is that recently we have figured out that what had happened is that in Greek, the Greek language changed. And there used to be a letter called a digamma. A digamma made a W sound, Wilusa. And it was used at Mycenaean period of time. And then, of course, writing stopped. But when writing starts, they're still using the digamma. It's like I said, it's a Greek letter that's a W sound. It's a consonant. What happens is that even some, it's so funny, even the early stratum of the Iliad, the meter is a little off when they say the name Elusium. You know why? Because the W was taken out and it shows in the meter. Isn't that fascinating? They took it out. Why? Because the letter was no longer used. But it's there. The echo is there. If you know Greek poetry and you know Greek, you know how the rhythm works, and you have consonant. Oh, what happened to consonant? It's missing. And it throws off things here and there. So Wilusa was the original name. Now you're going, well, but what about Troy? We call it Troy too. Remember that they called the place called Troy Ilium all the way into the Roman period of time. This was a common name. What I find is fascinating, the same Hittite list has the word on there itself, Tarusia. Tarusia. It's on there. And it's a derivative of the word Troy. And of course, going through etymology and over a period of time, you slowly that word will become Troy. Wait, you mean there's an Ilium and there's a Troy? Well, that's two different locations. No, what happened is this: Ilium was the city, Troy was the territory it was in charge of, and it became known as the Troad. But what they did is eventually they made the connection between the territory it has and the name of the city. And so it goes back to Troy. You guys learning things? Interesting? So there you have it. There's connections there. So now we have the mention of Troy by name. But the Hittite Empire, under a certain Tudhaliya, gotta love these names, Tudhaliya II. Tudhaliya II, he reigned from 1450 to 1420 BCE. He defeated the Asua League. In 1430 BCE. By the way, if you take a look at this date, you'll find earlier references to this in the 90s and early 2000s, and they'll say 1400. Now we know it's 1430 as of 2011. So I'm giving you the up-to-date references. The Asua League, right, and its war with the Hittites is mentioned in 6 Hittite records. 6! Now, as Tudhaliya was leading the coastal regions following a military campaign against the state of Arzawa, which we'll talk about soon, Hapala, and a place designated as the Sahil Riverland, the land of Asua rose up and challenged his authority, which includes Troy. They fighting against the Hittites. Well, they fought back. The Hittites fought back, and the Asua, it's a complete defeat. Complete defeat. In fact, Tudhaliya brings back 10,000 captive Asuan soldiers to his capital of Hattusas, together with 600 teams of horses, oxen, and sheep. He also brought back much of the population of Asua, including its former kings. It's a total and complete defeat. He also brought back a sword from the Asua, a ceremonial sword. Inscribed on it, it talks about how he shattered the Asua country. But what's interesting about this sword is that you look at it, and the Meg is very close to Mycenaean. Mycenaean, that's Greek. But wait, he's conquering the Asua. They're not Greeks. What's going on? In the same treasures, they found Tudhaliya II. They found a Hittite bull that has on it a Mycenaean, a Greek warrior. There he is. The Mycenaeans already there? Aren't they? That's a little early. They're there. In fact, we have records of the Hittites and the Mycenaeans. Quite a few, in fact. You see, the Mycenaeans, according to Hittite records, are called the Ahia Jawa. Just think of Ahia, something hot. Think of a little creature from Star Wars, a Jawa. Ahia Jawa, you got it. The Ahia Jawa is the name. Ahia Jawa is the name of the Mycenaeans. Ahia Jawa has been determined as of 2011 by Eric Klein as a root for Achaean, as in Achaean Greeks. That's just the early predecessor to the word. Ahia Jawa. So it's been proven beyond, we have 25, get this, 25 Hittite texts that talk about the Mycenaeans. And at this time, according to Hittite records, the Mycenaeans, right? The Mycenaeans supported the Asua League. They supported it. But according also to the same records, the Mycenaeans were not there. They possessed islands, and they were still in mainland Greece at this time. When is this time? Once again, between 1450 to 1420 BCE. Now we have another record. A damaged letter dated to the reign of Tudahilya II again, which mentions the fact that the king of the Achaean was in possession of various islands closer to the coast. So it looks like the Mycenaeans already at this time are starting to come. Wait a minute. You said 1190 is when the time, according to the Iliad, that the Greeks were arriving in that territory. But this is like the 1400s BCE, and they're already there? They're already there. I think we're going to have to change things. They're already getting themselves involved in the affairs, which includes Troy. This same letter talks about that he's doing a campaign, and he's doing this campaign nearby the place, of course, of Troy, Wilusa. He also mentions the fact, though, in this letter, that the Mycenaeans are supporting the revolt. They're the ones that are creating the revolt in many ways, and he gives details about that. That means, this is funny, that means, in English, is that the Asua, which includes Troy, are being supported by the Mycenaean Greeks against the Hittites. They're on the same side. Greeks and Trojans are on the same side. Not opposite sides, the same side. This is, again, a big deal. Mm-hmm. Side by side, fighting against the Hittites. Now, what's going to happen is that when Asua is destroyed, he puts together, the Hittite king puts together another kingdom that's like it for a short period of time. But eventually another kingdom takes up the same void that the Asua once held. And unfortunately, it's another A name. Because, why not? It's called the Arzawa. The Arzawa were located further to the south. But what they did is that they, when the Asua were destroyed by the Hittites, and the Mycenaeans were just kind of left out, the Arzawa then moved and occupied the same area. Now, the Arzawa relationship with the Hittites was at best complicated. Sometimes they were a vassal state. Sometimes they were their biggest enemy. A very entertaining incident happened where the Arzawa and the Egyptians made an alliance. Amenhotep III of the Egyptians, and of course another wonderful name, Tar-Hundadardu, king. Their correspondence survives, going back and forth. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to cement an alliance with one another. So how do you cement an alliance? Well, marriage. Mm-hmm. So the Egyptian representatives, they go north, they sail north, and they arrive at the Arzawa court. And the envoy says, hey, you know what? This is what Amenhotep III says. He says, I'm going to give, I would like to have one of your ladies to marry in an alliance. And it seems like a routine situation. And then he hands him a document, And the king of Arzawa can't read it because it's not in Hittite or anything else like that. So he's upset. He's all, how do I know that what you're saying is what this says right here as a document? Verify it. So envoy says, I'm on Hotep's representatives. I just told you that, we want a woman that's connected with you for him to marry. That's all. I can't read it. Go back. And the note says, and make sure that it's in Hittite this time. So he goes back, and he comes, and then another representative shows up, probably because the first one was upset, shows up with a proper documentation. Now it's all in Hittite, and the words fit, and then the agreement is made. I think it's kind of funny how that shows you how the the Hittites and other people in the surrounding areas of Anatolia are very much into detail-oriented situations or records. But so moving right along. So what happens is the Arzawa, though, grow in power. And the reason why Pharaoh wants to be connected to them is because they are able to defeat the Hittites and take over the plains of Konya for a period of time. And they're going, Troy, I want to hear about Troy. Don't worry, we're getting there. Okay? So what happens is the Arzawa rise up against the Hittites, as I mentioned, and they have an alliance with the Mycenaeans. But something has changed in this case. Something big, and it's very worth noting. They formed this Anti-Hittite League. It's the year 1320 BCE. And they have, of course, the Arzawa and other kingdoms. They have Egyptian support. But they also have the Mycenaeans. But the Mycenaeans are no longer just on the islands anymore, according to the Hittite records. They have already occupied and possess the city of Miletus. It's now theirs. In fact, they create their own special kingdom right there in Anatolia. They cut a piece. Now all of a sudden, once again, the story of the Trojan War, it's changing. You see how this works? Mm-hmm. Now you have the Mycenaeans, and they're right there. They've cut a part of the country. And the Mycenaeans start moving north. And they start moving towards the city of Ephesus. In the Arzawa kingdom, the capital of the Arzawa kingdom is Ephesus, which is Ephesus. That is the capital. All right, so moving right along. So the Mycenaeans are now there. Now what happens is that the Hittite king, Sepaluma I, 1344 to 1322, was able to push back the Arzawa alliance with some success. And he does it in connection to cultivating a relationship with the city of Wilusa. Huh? Troy. What? The Hittites? Yes. So wait, I thought yes. So Troy was a part of the Asua. Troy was a part of the Arzawa, but now the Hittites they pull Troy away from the Arzawa and make them their allies instead. Mm-hmm. And so now it's Troy on the side of the Hittites against the Mycenaeans and the others. See how tables have turned. Yeah. Like I said, while this may seem dry to some, this is extremely exciting because we're creating a story here that's really a backstory of the Trojan War. Okay, moving right along. So, what happens is that Supaluma I cultivated close friendship with the king of Troy, and his name is Kukununi. K-U-K-K-U-N-N-I. Tell you, love these names, right? So now we have a name of a king of Troy. But it's a Luvian name. It's a localized name, which is fascinating, right? So we know, but they're in alliance with the Hittites. Now, what happens is that means obviously they turn against the Greeks at this time. But a strange thing happens. After this Suppiluliuma the first, the next Hittite king, his name is Mursili II. There's actually one in between, but he died of plague. 1321 to 1295 BCE. And it's funny. Right after Troy joins the Hittite side against the Arzawa being supported by the Mycenaeans, suddenly the Mycenaeans stop fighting the Hittites and they enter into a peace treaty. To the point where Mursili II actually invites the Ahijawa, the Mycenaean nobility, to Hattusas, to the capital, to teach them the art of chariot making. Then what happens is that he gets sick. He gets so sick, according to his own records, he calls for one of the gods of the Mycenaeans, the images, to come to Hattusas, to the capital, to heal him. Well, that tells you there's a relationship going on. What do you think? Unfortunately, that relationship started breaking apart. They betrayed him, and there's a great war. And between 1306 to 1305 BCE, the kingdom of Arzawa is defeated by the Hittites. The victory is complete. The defeated king flees Ephesus and heads west, quote, across the sea to the islands. In other words, he flees the Mycenaeans. And so Arzawa is split into three provinces. Myra, which is south along the Meander River, which kind of twines around. Hapala, and a place known as the Siha River land. It's split. Now, according to a letter dated to around 1295, to either the Hittite king Mursili II, or the next one, Muwatalli II. It was a letter written by a client king by the name of Manapa Tarhunta. There was an attack upon Troy. Now we have an attack on Troy by a notorious marauder. His name is Piyama Radu, who is also attacking other places about western Anatolia. The name Piyama Radu is a Luwian name. It's a local name. His name indicates that he was from the local area. He's not Greek. So what happens is this local client king attempts to drive out Piyama Radu, but fails. In response, the Hittite king sent his own forces to deal with Piyama Radu, campaigning by Walusa, and is able to hold him off. But Piyama Radu survives to fight another day. Sorry about that. The Hittite king, by the way, here we find records of a description of Troy by the Hittites. And it mentions the fact that the Iliad had a great water tunnel that went under the city. And guess what? They discovered it. At first they thought it was Roman, and now it turns out it dates back to 2600 BCE. Now you got a text validation of the, once again, of the fact that this is indeed Troy. Right? Now the Hittite king attempts to suppress, once again, the local Piyam Radu. Remember I told you he goes to fight another day? Well, he fights for the next 60 years. I don't know what happens. There's this marauder. What he does is that he just keeps causing trouble for over 60 years in the area around Troy and further south. But Piyama Radu makes an alliance with the Mycenaeans, who support him. In fact, he gives his own daughter's hand in marriage to the Mycenaean governor or king of Miletus to seal the deal. Now, as mentioned, as late as around 1300s, the Hittite king Suppiluliuma I cultivated close friendship with Kukuluni, the king of Troy. Remember that? By the way, that's a very Luvian name. It's a localized name. But you want to hear this, hold on to your chairs. Because in 1280, the grandson of Suppiluliuma I of the Hittites, his name is King Malawata II. He reigned from 1295 to 1272. He desired to maintain that friendly precedent with the current king of Troy. The current king of Troy's name is Alexandus. Alexandus. By creating the peace treaty. Alexandus, that doesn't sound very Hittite or Luvian. It's not. It's Greek. It's a Greek form of Alexander. There is a King Alexander of Troy. Interesting, because the Iliad talks about there's an Alexander, king, connected, of course, to the name Paris, if you remember this. There's a precedent there. And they make a truce. They make a truce at this time. Now, the king, the Hittite king says something very interesting. Malawata II, he says he's recalling the earlier friendship between the Hittites and those at Troy. He talks about this. And then he tells Alexandus, he says, you know what? Royal blood is not the most important thing. No. The most important thing is that, you're in power. Well, what does that mean? That means that what happens is the Hittite king knows that Alexandus is not even related to the earlier guy, the earlier king of Troy, with that wonderful name, right? He is a newcomer. Why is that important? The Greeks have Troy. I think that's rather important. It gets better. In the treaty between them, the two, the peace treaty between Alexandus and the Hittite king, there are gods invoked on either side to seal the deal. And the name of one of the gods on the Troy side is named Apollonius, known as the, quote, on the document, the storm god of the army. Apollo is already mentioned according to the Hittites. So not only do you have a Greek king of Troy, they're worshiping some Greek gods. Is this changing our view of the Iliad? Yeah, we haven't got to the Trojan War yet. We're rewriting everything. I'm sorry. I don't mean to do this. But history's being rewritten. Right? And so we go through it. Of course, there's others that go on. According to the Malawata Letter, written by Hattusilus III, 1267 to 1237 BCE, this is a letter written to the Mycenaean king around most people say around 1250. And guess who's still around? Remember Rietveld? He's still around. Remember that marauder I talked about? This guy is still going. He's still causing problems. And they don't know what to do with him. So what happens, he's causing troubles in Western Anatolia, and so Hattusilus III orders his extradition, saying that Rietveld is to be his vassal, and assures the king of the Mycenaeans that he would receive safe conduct. Huh? If you can't beat him, co-opt him. Right? Yeah. So, although some Hittite scholars say, well, no, really what what's happening is that he wanted to make a client, because it's hard to read the Hittite, the client, not this gentleman, but another individual, the brother of the king of the Mycenaeans, by the name of Taladala, who, by the way, is transliterated over to Itacales, which is another Greek name. Lots of Greeks everywhere. going back and forth. But apparently it didn't work out because, you see, Payamaradu, he's still marauding in 1240. So he just goes on. I mean, I think somebody should have write the story of his life. Never give up, never surrender. Playing off each side against each other. We have other letters, of course. As for there's another letter called the Malawata Letter. This is a diplomatic letter written by either Hattusilius III or Tulahia IV, who, by the way, is from 1237 to 1209. And it's written to a client king in western Anatolia. The Hittite king tells the client king that he needs to turn over a group of fugitives to the Hittites and to dispatch a pretender to the throne of Troy, to give him to a Hittite envoy so that he can be sent back to be reestablished as king of Troy. Oh no, what happened here? It looks like situations in Troy are starting to deteriorate. Are you seeing that? I love this because this is history going on, right? Well, apparently what happened is that the Hittites, endorsed the kings of Troy, but apparently the people were not happy about it. And they threw out their king, and here this Hittite king is now setting out to put back the pretender, put him back onto the throne so that he can continue as a sense of puppet. The problem is that we don't know the name of the king, if it's a Greek name or if it's a Hittite name or what. But this is a big deal because now this changes what's going on. This looks like to me that the conflict with Troy went on a little bit longer. I forgot to mention, and it's mentioned in an earlier page, and I think I have it right here. I forgot to mention that there is another document that talks about the fact that there was a war. There was a war between the Hittites and the Mycenaeans. It's on your handout. The Hittites and the Mycenaeans over Troy. There was an earlier war between the Hittites and the Mycenaeans over Troy. The war has been going on. Any questions so far? So where do we go from here? In fact, I think I'm right here. Let's see here. Don't you love how the print on this? Can you even read this? I don't know. Let's see here. Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I don't see here. I won't worry about it too much. Okay. So what's going to go on is let's talk about Troy itself now. Troy. Let's look at the archaeology briefly. From 3000 to 2600 BCE, that was known as Troy 1. And see, Troy was so important because it's located along the Dardanelles towards the Black Sea. This is an important communication point between the Aegean Sea and the Black Sea. So if you're wanting to go head north or south, it was recommended to go along this path. But there's a few problems though. And that is that at the point of where Troy is located, from that point on, the current actually moves against them along with a wind that blew northwest as opposed to northeast, which is the direction of the Dardanelles, which made it very difficult to row. That means that you really had to stop at Troy in order to take a rest before you go further on. It was a natural rest spot. And this is one of the reasons why it was founded. Troy 2 dates from 2600 to 2250 BCE. We know that Troy 2, 2600, 2250, covered an area of 90,000 square meters, about 22 acres. Through comparative work in connection to the early Bronze Age settlement, we know that it had about 3,300 people. A giant ramp survives from that period of time. We also, of course, Troy 3 was destroyed by fire as of Troy 2. Troy 4, there's a noticeable decline where people are just simply living within the citadel. During the time of Troy 5, and that period is from 2100 to 1950 BCE. During that time, there's some major changes in the material culture. It looks like that people are coming from the east and they're changing the settlement patterns, as well as we get different ceramics during that period of time. From Troy 1 to Troy 5, archaeologists have discerned that the Trojans were eating mostly pork and lamb. That was their main diet, as far as meat source is concerned. But interestingly enough, is that when the Mycenaeans arrive, they start eating lots of beef. I'm not sure if there's a connection or not, but they move to eating more cows. As far as the Trojans also consume milk, cheese, and yogurt. Dogs were not used for food, but they were used for hunting at this period of time. Now we get to Troy 6, and this is divided into an earlier period, ranging from 1700 to 1400 BCE, and a later period identified as Troy 6H, going from 1400 to 1250 BCE. We now know that Troy 6, between 1700 and 1400, was when they were part of the Asua Confederacy. And then what happens is there's a big shift. Now we can line this all up, putting it all together. All right. We know during this period of time that Troy covered 250,000 square meters, or 62 acres. It had a population around 10,000. They did much of the excavation during the 1990s and the 2000s. We also know that the language of Troy is Luwian. We found an inscription, in fact, a few inscriptions, and Luwian is connected to, it's an Anatolian language that's connected to Hittite. That means that the Trojans, their language is connected to Hittite. So they are, it's interesting, even though you have this change going on, even at this time, the majority of the people in Troy most likely spoke an indigenous language as opposed to Greek, which makes you wonder if King Alexander just took over the leadership as opposed to a complete invasion. See how that works? Now, moving right along. Troy 6. Troy 6 has also Mycenaean pottery. Mm-hmm. Lots of it, especially in houses F and G. But the pottery appears at a certain time, and then Troy is destroyed by an earthquake around 1250. Troy is destroyed by an earthquake? That Troy. 1250. Interesting. An earthquake. Well, I think it's fascinating because we have reference to an earthquake earlier on in the Iliad, too. That Troy was destroyed by an earthquake and it was rebuilt. So we have a collaboration of sources. So what happens? Did we just rewrite the whole story of Troy? Because what happens at the end, the very end, Troy is destroyed in 1190. It looks like there's a collaboration of dates. And then after that, it enters into a decline, although there's more Troys, lots of Troys after that. But what happened? It looks like that when we look at the story of the Iliad, it's a little bit more complicated than all that. What we gain or what we learn from this is the fact that the Mycenaeans were already very well involved in that area of the world for around 200 years earlier. They're already playing games with Troy, constantly back and forth. But the interesting thing is, as time goes on, Troy becomes idealized. In fact, the stories go, and you go from the Mycenaean period of time, and then you have the Greek Dark Ages for 400 years, and that by that period of time, mythology starts to set in. Right? One other point I want to bring up, it also looks like that Troy much of it was destroyed, as well as the entire region, not by the Mycenaeans, not by the Hittites, but a group known as the Sea Peoples. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that truly destroy the entire region, and at that point, much of the Hittites are destroyed by these mysterious Sea Peoples.
Is anything known about them?
Yes. Within the last 10 years, we have deciphered that some of the Sea Peoples just happen to be Mycenaeans. So they're amongst these marauding groups going about and destroying much of the land. There's lots of reasons for that, but that's a whole other lecture, right? But the legacy we get is a heroic one. The heroic one, the belief and the ideal that this was a great age of gods and men. This is the last gasp before everything goes into decline. You see, the gods believed, the gods talked about that there are 4 great ages. You got the age of gold. This is an age of righteousness, of decay. But humanity descended to the age of silver. The age of silver was an age of hubris, of pride. And then humanity descended into Ate, the age of delusion. Delusion. This is where hubris takes flight. It's the story where somebody's pride becomes so big that they lose all sensibility and they stumble and they fall over their own feet. But the next stage is the age of Nemesis, of judgment. This is where you're judged. Humanity is judged for the actions it does. But there's one more age. You have the 4 great ages. The age of righteousness, the age of pride, delusion, and judgment. And they stuck another age in between delusion and judgment. And that was called the heroic age. He stuck that in. And they said, this is the age of Troy. This is the age of heroes. This is an age of valor. This is an age of bravery. And they told their readers of the Iliad, of the Odyssey, take a look at the heroic age, the age of the Mycenaeans, as a model for your life. And it will lead us from this current age of judgment into a new golden age. We'll be saved. You follow the models of Achilles. What? Achilles? You told that whole story, He's sulking in his tent, for heaven's sakes. Yes. But, right? He was righteous. And then he became prideful, right?
Right.
Hubris, and then he became delusional. I'm not going to fight no matter what, Patroclus, where's my armor? That's pretty delusional. But then, suddenly, what happened? He woke up. Valor set in. He beat the Trojans. Mm-hmm. See? And the idea is that we all go through this in life. You see, just like the ages of humanity, a golden age of righteousness, an age of pride, delusion, and of course going down to judgment. The idea is that no. We have hope. We have models to follow. We have heroes. We all go through the same cycles in our own personal lives as the ages of humanity. So just like the ages, just like each hero went through those phases of righteousness, of hubris, of delusion, and of judgment, you too can enter into righteousness with them. Take them as your models. And that is what happened as a result of the great work known as the Iliad. Yes, there seems to be connections in the past of a real Trojan War, but it's a lot messier than you would expect. At the same time, there's a little kernel of hope, because some parts of the Iliad are very true. Thank you.